Mated to the Lycan King. Chapter 16. Lucian took the steps to the north tower 3 at a time, boots hammering stone hard enough to echo through the inner courtyard. Wind slammed at his hair, and night's last stars clung to a paling sky as he reached the parapet. The watch captain met him, breath clouding. 200 paces out, my king. Movement along the bracken. Dogs caught unfamiliar scent just before the horn. Lucian's gaze swept the bluff, where dew silvered the grass. Beyond the tree line, shadows paced, low and purposeful. Shapes too disciplined for wildlife, too numerous for a scouting party. His gut knew before his mind finished measuring. Rogues organized and testing. He turned to the captain. Sound a second alarm, then take archers to positions 2 and 4. Signal once you have sight on their numbers. Footfalls behind him. Darius, fully armed, eyes already scanning. Lucian pointed. They're massing in the draw. Could be 50, could be more. If they break the ridge, we funnel them between the watch gully and the orchard. Darius nodded, setting jaw. I'll post shields by the apple trenches and heavy spears on the low wall. Serena and her crestfall rangers had reached the tower as well. She saluted with brisk precision. My scouts can skirt wide. See if another flank hides deeper. Do it, Lucian ordered, then lowered his voice. And watch for decoys. He pivoted, descending. On the spiral stairs, he met Kieran sprinting upward, sword half-sheathed. Ella? Lucian asked. Safe with Raven, Kieran rasped, but she won't stay locked away. He flashed a grim smile. Neither will my Luna. The twins? I'm on my way, Lucian answered. Hold north gate until horns sound thrice. They split at the landing. Lucian's strides lengthened, battering corridors until he reached the nursery wing. Isara knelt within a chalk circle, whispering a low chant that threaded through warm air like golden filaments. Liana and Leora slept in the circle's center, tiny chests rising as though drawing in the magic itself. Raven stood just outside, dagger at her thigh, eyes dark with worry she refused to voice. They're close, Lucian said. Raven nodded once. Her arms swept the twins up, first Liana, then Leora, and pressed gentle kisses to each crown. Isara rose. The ward holds against steel and flame, she assured softly. And against fear, Raven murmured, meeting the shaman's eyes. I'll entrust them to you now, but if my daughters cry, Isara's voice held iron, then I will move the heavens to hush the storm. Lucian touched Raven's shoulder. We need your flames at the gully. She inhaled, steadying. Leora whimpered as she passed her back into Isara's arms. Raven's throat threatened to close, but she forced a tender smile. Mama will return soon, little spark. Sleep for me. Thalos appeared in the doorway, staff in hand, face carved from stone. I'll stay with Isara. Nothing crosses this threshold. Raven laid a palm on his arm in wordless gratitude, then followed Lucian into the hall. They met Ella and Kieran at the corridor's fork. Ella wore light leather, a short sword belted above her growing curve. Kieran's expression balanced pride and panic. You belong in the keep, he murmured, fingers skimming her cheek. I belong at your side, she countered. Child or no child, I fought before I ever loved you, and that woman still stands inside me. Lucian stepped close. Ella, the southern pack, needs its Luna alive. She looked him squarely in the eye. And this kingdom needs every able blade. Give me a post behind the main line, triage and evac. Kieran's shoulders dropped in relief. Lucian nodded. Done. He gripped Kieran's wrist before moving on. Garter hope. Outside morning pushed lavender at the horizon as horns blared twice. Warriors spilled through barracks doors, strapping helms, stringing bows. Raven strode between them, heat rippling in her wake. Sparks clung to the ends of her hair as if magnetized by her pulse. In the lower yard, Serena reported, 30 confirmed, maybe more holding back. They carry spiked shields and chain flails, forming wedges. Darius arrived, face streaked with war paint. Traps set in the orchard rows. Spearmen ready. Lucian's voice cut through rising tension. Archers to wall walk, loose on my mark. Kieran, hold left flank with wind bursts to break their charge. Raven, you and I defend the funnel. Serena, circle to their rear. Drive, stragglers forward into our net. Thalos, once you know the twins secured, bring Isara to the inner line. We may need her wards mid-battle. A third horn blast bit the air. Steel hissed free. Raven's palms bloomed fire. Lucian's claws lengthened, silver tips catching dawnlight. Warriors formed ranks. Shields thunked earth. Then the first rogue breached the ridge, snarling, eyes feral red, followed by a tide of dark leathers and crude sigils. Their leader, a scarred brute wielding a jagged axe, roared, and the pack surged. Arrows sang from the battlements, raining into their front ranks. A few rogues stumbled, pierced, but momentum carried the rest down the slope. Kieran lifted his hands. A wall of wind slammed forward, scattering the first wedge, but another crashed behind it. Raven stepped into their path. Flame knifed out, twisting as Kieran fed it air. A rolling inferno barricaded the funnel, forcing rogues sideways into the apple trenches where spear tips awaited. Lucian moved like storm steel, claws severing chain flails mid-swing. He ripped a shield from an attacker, reversing it into another's snarling face. Blood sprayed. The grass hissed beneath Raven's flames. Darius marshaled pike units, shouting terse orders, eyes cutting constantly to Serena's distant flank. Serena and her rangers emerged from behind a copse, arrows lit by pitch. They fired in unison. Flaming shafts arced overhead to fall among rogue rear ranks, sowing confusion. The leader bellowed commands drowned by crackle of burning grass. A rogue vaulted past pike tips, charging Ella's triage outpost where younger guards clustered. Ella stepped forward, sword steady though her abdomen tightened with each breath. She parried the rogue's first swipe, pivoted and hamstrung him with a swift sweep. Kieran's training returning with muscle memory. The rogue howled, but Serena's lieutenant felled him before he could rise. In the orchard center, Raven's heat threatened to scorch tree bark. She drew in the blaze, condensing it to a narrow lash that flicked across enemy lines like a comet. Kieran's wind snatched sparks, fanning them into small explosions that drove rogues back into pikes and archers' arrows. Suddenly, Lucian caught a glimpse of motion near the ward tower. 3 rogues scaling ivy toward a side parapet, the path to Isara's nursery wing. He barked an order to the nearest squad, but realized they were busy holding the flank. He sprinted, claws digging mortar. Raven saw his detour, sparks spitting from her fingertips in alarm. She called Kieran. "Guard the funnel, I'll flank Lucian." He nodded, summoning a cross-blast of wind that toppled the nearest wedge before she ran. Lucian reached the ivy wall, leapt and dragged the first climber down, snapping the rope. The second rogue lunged at him, blade skimming his side with a spark of pain before Lucian drove claws through his chest. The third reached the sill, but Raven arrived in a burst of flame. She hurled a fireball that slapped the climber off the stone, dropping him onto waiting spears below. Lucian's breathing ragged, he wiped blood from his ribs. Raven's firelight flickered over the wound. "We can't leave the wall thin," he said. She touched his wound. Heat sealed flesh enough to stem bleeding. "Go," she told him. "I'll cover." Back at the funnel, Kieran faltered, wind thinning. Rage carried a fresh wave of rogues pushing through. Thalos and Isara emerged, her staff blazing violet wards. Isara chanted, weaving a shimmering net of light across the breach. Thalos swung his ironwood staff, shattering flails, buying seconds until Raven arrived. She raised both hands. Twin ribbons of flame snaked up, merging above the breach in a blazing sigil that pulsed with living heat. Kieran exhaled, feeding the symbol fresh wind. The sigil bloomed outward, slamming into the rogue wave with a roar. Bodies flew back like leaves in a gale. At last, horns on the ridge sounded retreat. Serena's rangers had circled fully, cutting supply lines and torching their escape path. Surrounded, leaderless, the remaining rogues broke ranks, scattering into the forest where crestfall arrows picked them off. Lucian gave the cease signal. Archers lowered bows, pikes withdrew. Smoke drifted over trampled grass. The first birds of morning cried uncertain notes above the hush of dying flames. Part 1 ends with warriors catching breath, sweat steaming in dawnlight. Lucian scanned for losses, heart pounding. Raven's fire died to embers around her fists. Across the field, Ella leaned against Kieran, one hand over her belly, eyes shining with fierce relief. Darius stood beside Serena, their shoulders touching. Thalos and Isara remained near the warded entrance, guarding 2 tiny girls who slept on, unaware that the kingdom had balanced that morning on the edge of fire and steel. Lucian's ears still rang with battle cries when he reached the triage tents hastily erected beneath the shadow of the eastern wall. The canvas flapped in a restless wind that carried the metallic tang of blood and the sweeter notes of crushed grass. Inside, healers moved in efficient silence, binding wounds, chanting low incantations over broken bones. The air smelled of comfrey paste and singed cloth. Near the tent's entrance, Ella knelt beside a young archer, pressing a folded bandage against a gash in the girl's thigh, while guiding her breathing with steady words. Kieran hovered, visibly torn between fussing over his mate and joining the litter-bearers hauling the last injured from the field. Lucian stepped in, resting a hand on the younger Alpha's armored shoulder. We held the ridge. No sign of a second wave. He kept his voice low so as not to raise hopes too quickly. Kieran exhaled, shoulders relaxing a fraction, and turned to Ella. You saved half this tent. Ella's gaze lifted, tired but bright. They saved themselves. She looked at the girl now sitting upright, pain dulled by healer's balm. Rest easy. Then Ella allowed Kieran to help her to her feet, though she waved off his hand when he tried to support her weight. I'm pregnant, Kieran, not shattered glass still. She laced her fingers with his. Come, we check the others. Lucian scanned the narrow rows of cots. He counted fewer casualties than he had feared, but each face carved a hollow in his chest. Serena entered with 3 crestfall rangers following, all bearing small cuts and bruises. She spoke quietly with the head healer, then turned, eyes searching until they locked on Darius just outside the flap. He waited, posture rigid, gripping the shaft of his spear too tightly. When their gazes met, something eased in each of them. Darius stepped forward. How many lost? Serena asked, voice a shade above a whisper. 2, Darius answered hoarsely. Less than we feared. Every loss weighs, she said. He nodded. You fought like the storm itself. She glanced down, almost flustered by the compliment. Because the kingdom stood at my back. Outside, Raven approached the tent, the heat of battle wintering into weariness in her limbs. Her leather sleeves were scorched, the air around her still shimmered faintly. She paused to wipe soot from her cheek before pushing inside. Liana and Leora? Ella asked at once. Safe with Isara and Thalos. Raven's shoulders sagged as adrenaline drained. Any word from Lucian's western flank? Ella shook her head, but the walls stand. Kieran returned, supporting an older guard on one side. Once the man was eased onto a cot, Kieran guided Raven to a stool and pressed a clay mug of water into her hands. You burned half the orchard, he teased, though his smile faltered when he saw blackened patches on her bracers. She laughed, short and weary. We'll replant. Fire renews soil. A distant cheer rose from the courtyard. Lucian's figure appeared outside the tent, stained with dust and blood but unbowed. Raven met him in 3 strides, water sloshing from the mug forgotten on the ground. He folded her into his arms, the smell of smoke and steel giving way to the familiar sandalwood warmth of his skin. We did it, she breathed. This time, he answered, pressing a kiss into her hair. Always this time, until the next. She pulled back to inspect the slash across his ribs. He grimaced when her fingers brushed the half-sealed wound. Flesh knit, pride bruised, he joked. Raven's hand glowed faintly, coaxing the scab to close a bit more. Save full healing for later, he murmured. Still others to treat before me. Serena's voice drew them. Lucian, we captured 2 lieutenants alive. They're chained in the cellar keep. Said little on the field. Lucian nodded sharply. Interrogation after wounded tended. He glanced at Darius. Your strength left to stand sentinel? Always, Darius replied, though Raven saw exhaustion tugging at his shoulders. She laid light fingers on his arm. Rest comes later for all of us, but it must come. The afternoon wore on. Healers moved methodically. Warriors stripped scorched gear and washed grime from faces. The rogue bodies were cleared beyond the walls, bonfires readied for burning. Ravens already circled in black gyres overhead. Yet within the fortress, children peeked from safe rooms, eyes wide. The air, though stained with smoke, tasted of victory. At sunset, Raven finally slipped away to the warded nursery. Inside, Isara sat cross-legged against the wall, Thalos leaning nearby with his staff across his lap. Liana and Leora nested in Isara's lap, tiny fists gripping the edge of the shaman's cloak. At Raven's entrance, both girls chirped in recognition. Isara smiled, lines at her eyes deepening. They woke just after the wind quieted. Keen senses, your daughters. Raven gathered them, burying her face in their warm necks. The salty sting of tears surprised her. Thalos rose, bowing slightly. The wards held. None breached the inner corridor. Thank you, she whispered. Thalos hesitated, then touched Raven's shoulder, an uncharacteristic gesture of reassurance, before leaving with Isara trailing behind. The 2 elders walked side by side down the corridor, their hands brushing once, twice, before Isara lightly curled her fingers around his. Raven settled onto the nursery rocking chair, daughters pressed close. She hummed a lullaby until their small eyelids drooped. Then exhaustion wove its heavy net around her. Moments later, the door creaked. Lucian entered, his presence a balm. He knelt, careful not to wake the twins, and rested his forehead against her knee. We lost 5, he said softly. Fewer than expected, but 5 too many. She carded her fingers through his hair. We'll mourn them at dawn. For now, breathe with me. He exhaled, letting grief and relief mingle. A knock. Kieran stepped in, Ella at his side. Her cheeks were pale, but fierce light shone in her eyes. The rogue commander? Raven asked. Kieran shook his head, slipped away in the chaos. But Darius's prisoners will talk. Ella approached the cradle, brushing a finger over Liana's cheek. She turned to Raven. They grow stronger each day. So do we all, Raven answered. Ella's hand went to her belly. And tomorrow my little one will kick these walls down from inside. Raven stood, passing the girls to Lucian, then embraced Ella. Thank you for guarding our future. Ella smiled. Thank you for lighting the way. Down in the training yard, torches flared anew for evening council. Darius waited with Serena, both armored again but in lighter garb. As Raven, Lucian, and Kieran arrived, Thalos and Isara joined, the elders' staff glowing faintly with runes. Lucian surveyed the circle. Victory today. Tomorrow, preparations. The rogues knew our routines. A spy slipped south of the forest. Someone fed them maps. Serena's jaw tightened. I will question my prisoners personally. Darius placed a steadying hand on her back. She didn't shrug it off. Kieran glanced at Raven. During the battle, we felt a surge in the ground, like magic drawn, not by us. Raven nodded. I sensed it before the fight. Something deeper stirs. Isara's eyes shuddered. Old roots break loose when young trees grow tall. Thalos murmured agreement. Forces that fail to bend often try to sever. Lucian absorbed their warnings, then issued new orders. Doubled patrols at the gorge, secret signals rotated nightly. Messenger wolves dispatched to allied packs. Meeting adjourned, Darius lingered with Serena at the edge of torchlight. He spoke softly. "When the questioning is done, let me walk you to the ramparts." She studied his face, tired yet earnest. "I would like that." She hesitated, then added, "Thank you for trusting my command." He touched her gauntlet-covered wrist. Trust was the easiest part of today. On a balcony overlooking lantern-specked courtyards, Thalos and Isara paused. The shaman's silver braids glimmered. Thalos reached to tuck a stray lock behind her ear. "You saved them all," he said. Isara shook her head gently. "We saved each other." She laid a kiss on his weathered knuckles. Inside their chamber, Lucian laid the twins in the cradle and turned to Raven. She pressed a damp cloth to his side, cleaning dried blood. He hissed, but didn't flinch. His voice roughened. "I feared losing you when you raced to cover me. And I feared losing you. Yet here we stand." Lucian cupped her face, forehead leaning to hers. "I swore to protect our family. But today our daughters were safest when your fire burned hottest." "We guard each other," Raven replied. They eased onto the bed, bodies aching yet relieved. Lucian kissed the inside of her wrist. She traced the lines at the corner of his eyes. For a while they simply existed, breaths synchronizing, hearts beating a new rhythm shaped by survival. Outside, campfires crackled in guarded watch. The dead would be honored at dawn. Their sacrifice already hallowed the earth. Ella slept curled against Kieran in the solar. His hand splayed gently over her belly, his other gripping his sword even in dreams. Darius paced the ramparts with Serena until stars thinned, finding solace in shared silence. Thalos and Isara dozed in chairs just outside the nursery, staff across their laps, protective ward murmuring like a distant lullaby. And Raven, holding Lucian's hand, watched first light bleed over the window, brushing hope onto the horizon. Tomorrow might bring darker clouds, but she felt certainty root again. Flames, wind, stone, wisdom, and love, all united. The storm would return, but they would rise, unbroken. Dawn cracked the horizon in slow increments of rose and amber. A hush clung to the castle grounds, the kind that always followed a night of blood and smoke, a possession of reverence, the world unwilling to break its own quiet. Lucian stood at the edge of the courtyard, fingers laced behind his back, shoulders straight despite fatigue weighing every muscle. The bodies of the fallen lay on cedarboard biers draped in crimson cloth, each one circled by wildflowers gathered hastily from the orchard. 5 warriors, 5 hearts stilled for the kingdom. Raven moved along the line of biers, torch in one hand, the other resting on Liana's sling across her chest. She spoke a blessing over each warrior, voice firm yet gentle, her flame-lit eyes reflecting grief that belonged to all of them. Some distance back, Darius, Kieran, Serena, Thalos, and Isara formed a semicircle, joined by the entire garrison in solemn witness. Ella stood with a contingent of healers. Though fatigue pulled at her spine, she held her chin high, one palm protective over her swelling belly. Lucian inhaled the cool morning air. Tradition demanded the Alpha say the names. He stepped forward when Raven reached the last bier. His voice carried through the courtyard, resonant yet raw around the edges. Marin of the Western Guard, Soren Crestfall, Illa, daughter of Garrick, Bryn of the Orchard Patrol, Commander Reeve, my cousin. He drew a breath that trembled. May your spirits run upon moonlit plains forever free. The kingdom stands because you fought. Raven lifted her torch. The flames she summoned were white at the core, gold at the edges, consuming, yet strangely, quiet. She touched the cloth of each bier. Fire swept outward in ripples, curling the petals of wildflowers, but leaving their color intact even as they burned. A wind gathered, Kieran's unspoken gift, lifting ash into the brightening sky like silver motes returning to stars. When the pyres subsided to glowing embers, Raven handed Liana to Ella and approached Lucian. He pressed a hand to her cheek, grief and pride mingling. "They'll be remembered," he said. "Always," she answered. The courtyard slowly emptied. Ella led a procession of healers to the inner hall, where breakfast stews awaited the wounded. Kieran joined Lucian, quiet until they reached the stair that overlooked the training yard. "I questioned the sentries who spotted our spy path," Kieran said. "No new movement since the retreat, but tracks vanished near the Shadow Creek. Someone used an old escape tunnel." Lucian leaned on the stone balustrade. "We'll seal every tunnel. Post double watch." He rubbed at the faint scar healing near his ribs. "This was a test. The real assault will aim beyond our walls, at hearts, at alliances." "We will be ready," Kieran murmured. Serena descended into the dim corridor of the cellar keep with Darius at her side. 2 iron-bound doors stood at the end, each flanked by a guard. The prisoners waited inside separate cells, wrists shackled to a ring in the wall. Serena dismissed the guards, leaving only Darius in silent support. Entering the first cell, she faced a gaunt rogue lieutenant whose lip curled as she stepped forward. He spat blood-tinged phlegm at her boots. Serena said nothing, merely crouched to his level, eyes calm. She spoke in a low voice, laced with crestfall cadence, using dialect few outside her pack knew. "Your leader fled. You are expendable to him. Tell me his next move, and you may yet keep your life." The lieutenant's eyes flickered, recognition of her accent cracking the bravado. "Still," he hissed, "traitors die traitor deaths." Serena didn't flinch. She gestured to Darius, who crossed the room and folded powerful arms. The rogue's gaze measured the general's size, his resolve wavering. Serena rose. "I will return in an hour. Consider if loyalty to a man who abandoned you is worth the pyre." She turned, motioned Darius out, and closed the door. In the corridor she breathed, shoulders sagging briefly before straightening. Darius touched her forearm. "You wield gentleness like a blade." She eyed him. "Will it cut?" "Time will tell." He hesitated, then added, "I stand with you, whatever path you take." Her lips softened at the edges. Meanwhile, Isara walked the outer ward garden carrying Leora in a sling. Thalos matched her pace, forging a gentle periphery of protection. The infant watched sunlight fracture through the leaves with wide eyes. Isara stroked tiny fingers curled against her chest. "She never wakes from nightmares," Isara mused. "No shadows cling to babes." Thalos tipped his head. "Shadows know better than to stain such light." He guided Isara to a bench near the herb beds. "Have you slept?" she asked, settling. Thalos shrugged. "Enough." "And you?" The shaman smiled, lines of fatigue carving deeper. "Sleep whispers, but duty speaks louder." He reached for her hand, calloused fingers closing carefully around hers. "Your duty included protecting my queen's children, and you did. Rest is your right." She leaned into his shoulder. "Will you keep watch if I close my eyes?" "Until time itself unravels," he promised. She surrendered to a brief doze, Leora's even breaths syncing with her own, Thalos's presence steady as an oak. Inside the royal wing, Ella sat with Raven at a round oak table, a map unrolled between them. Potential supply routes, healer stations, evacuation paths. Raven traced a finger along a dotted line. "We need a safe corridor to the river cliffs, should the walls fall." Ella nodded. "My southern hunters know those ravines. They'll mark a trail." Raven studied her friend's face. Fatigue shadowed her eyes, and she rubbed her belly absent-mindedly. "You should rest." "I will, right after we secure this plan." Raven smiled. Ella's resolve was steel disguised in gentleness. A soft knock. Kieran entered. "Time for the council, love." He looked to Raven. "Lucian waits in the solar." Ella rolled the map, handing it to Kieran. "Lead the way, Alpha." The council gathered. Lucian at the head, Raven on his right, Kieran, Ella, Darius, Serena opposite, Thalos and Isara flanking, though Isara's eyes were half-lidded with lingering fatigue. Lucian addressed them, voice tempered steel. The rogues struck with organization. They possessed maps, some outdated, some disturbingly current. There is a leak. Until we discover who, trust must harden. Serena laid a sealed scroll on the table. My rangers tracked a set of prints leading north, heavy, human, likely carrying messages. We'll send falcons to Shadow. Kieran noted supply wagons from the southern pack arrive tomorrow. We'll inspect each wagon before entry. Darius added, armories must inventory nightly. Missing arrows or oil pots could hint at saboteurs. Thalos's gravel voice carried across the table. Fear splits more packs than claws. We hold our unity visible, so traitors feel alone. Raven met his eyes. And we stoke hope so high that betrayal smothers itself. Lucian concluded with final directives, then the council dispersed. Ella lingered until the others departed. She faced Lucian. I asked to oversee the infirmary, she said. I know healing craft, and it keeps me near safety for the child. Lucian bowed his head. Granted. And thank you. Kieran kissed Ella's temple before she left. My brave Luna, he whispered. She smiled, eyes shining. That evening, interrogation resumed. Serena entered the rogue cell again, this time bearing a plain clay cup of water. She set it within the prisoner's reach, then sat opposite. The rogue eyed the cup but didn't lift it. Serena spoke quietly. My offer stands. Speak and you live. Remain silent, and my king will hand judgment to flaming pyres. The rogue's throat bobbed. He whispered hoarsely, Why trust? You'll kill me after. Because I know the knife of betrayal, Serena said, leaning forward, and I know mercy. He met her gaze, wariness unraveling. They want the twins, he rasped. Rumor says fire and wind-born flesh, magic to bend the realm. Lucian, Raven, they burn paths we cannot. She absorbed the words, expression tight. Who leads you? He shook his head violently. He hides his face, calls himself the Knight Reborn. Serena's blood chilled. She stood motioning to guards. Have healer tend him, then secure. She strode out, heartbeat hammering. In the hall, Darius waited. She relayed the intel. Knight Reborn, he repeated. Old rogue myth. Leader vanished years ago. If myth steps from shadow, he means to shatter prophecy at its root. Darius touched her elbow. You uncovered this. Your strength shields the twins. She met his eyes, and for once allowed herself the flicker of pride. Later, Raven sat alone in the moonlit library, studying a tome on ancient prophecy. Words blurred, fatigue dug into her skull. Yet she forced focus. Threat to twins, Knight Reborn, stolen maps. A low creak drew her head up. Lucian approached, 2 steaming mugs in hand. Tea, he said, offering one. She accepted, inhaling chamomile. He sat beside her, shoulder to shoulder, silence companionable. They sipped quietly. Finally, Lucian spoke. The more I fight to protect them, the more the world seems determined to test that vow. Raven closed the book, turning to him. Our daughters carry power that frightens people who cling to old hierarchies. But we will shape that power through love, not fear. He reached, brushing hair from her cheek. I believe you more than I believe sunrise. She smiled, then rested head against his shoulder. He set his mug aside and wrapped an arm around her waist. The fire crackled, the moon climbed higher, tension eased in that shared stillness. Down the hall, Thalos escorted Isara to her chamber. She paused at the threshold. You guarded me today, she said, yet I feel guilt for closing my eyes while others bled. Rest fuels magic, he replied. Your ward saved the innocent. She looked down, then up. Stay with me a while? Only if you wish. I do. He followed her inside, closing the door. They sat on cushions near a low table strewn with dried herbs. Isara lit a single candle. Its glow carved soft lines on Thalos's weathered face. She touched his hand. I spent years resigned to solitude, believing age dims desire. He covered her fingers with his. Desire blooms whenever sun meets fertile earth. She laughed quietly, delighted. They spoke long into the night, sharing stories of childhood, past battles, secret fears. When her eyelids grew heavy, she leaned against him. He wrapped an arm around her shoulder, content to watch flame dance till dawn. On the ramparts, Darius and Serena walked patrol beneath a sky star-crazed and fathomless. She relayed every morsel of information gleaned. Night Reborn's obsession with the twins, rumors of shadow sorcery. Darius listened, then stopped, turning to face her. You risked yourself unarmed in that cell, he said. She shrugged. Blades suffice against fear, but truth pries secrets best. He brushed a knuckle along her cheek, tentative. Your courage humbles me. She captured his hand, holding it against her pulse. Fear still lives in me, but you help it sleep. He smiled faintly. May I walk with you tomorrow? And the next? Yes. Her voice was a whisper. And perhaps we leave fear behind. Not long before dawn, Kieran found Ella seated by the nursery door, humming as she stitched a tiny blanket. He crouched. Couldn't sleep? She smiled wearily. Your son is restless. He laid a hand on her belly. A gentle kick greeted him. Already demands audience. He kissed her fingertips. I spoke to Lucian about fortifying the southern border. We may need to return home for a stint, secure our pack. She folded the blanket onto her lap. We will go when I'm fit to travel. And the twins safe. He nodded, admiration radiating. You have the heart of a queen. She snorted. I have the heart of a mother. Same crown, he teased. They entered the nursery quietly. Liana stirred. Leora remained asleep. Ella laid the blanket over the crib railing. She whispered, I will protect you as fiercely as your mother does. Kieran wrapped an arm around her. Together they watched dawn peel amber over the horizon. Raven woke to Liana's soft cry. She rose, gathered the babe, and padded to the balcony. Lucian stirred but let her go. Outside, morning birds stitched music through the air. Raven rocked gently, flame-kissed hair glowing in sunshine. She breathed deep, feeling a subtle hum underfoot, the kingdom's pulse, skittish but alive. Lucian joined, encircling her waist. Both girls, he murmured, will know this peace and war. Raven glanced up. They will also know love like ours, shield and lantern. He kissed her softly. We stand on the precipice of greater storms, but today's sun still rises. She nodded, pressing Liana closer. Below, soldiers lined for drills. Banners snapped crisp. The smell of baking bread wafted from kitchens. Life persevered. Lucian's voice was low. Tell me your mind. She exhaled. Night Reborn hunts their magic. If he learns the prophecy, he will stop at nothing. Then we stay steps ahead. We teach them strength. We forge alliances stronger than steel. And what of traitors among us? We root them out. Together. Liana cooed, little fingers tangling in Raven's braid. Raven laughed softly. She turned, handing the babe to Lucian, then reached to lift Leora from her cradle. The girls blinked at each other, then at their parents. Embodiments of Dawn's promise. Raven pressed her cheek to Lucian's shoulder. Let's begin again. Train, plan, love. Storms may gather, but so will we. Lucian touched foreheads with her. Then light the fires, my queen. We have a future to defend. Outside, bells tolled for morning meal. Warriors moved, babies cried. Lovers reunited. And high on the balcony, 4 figures, king, queen, and twin flames, watched the world sweep forward, determined that when darkness next clawed at their gates, it would find hearts forged brighter than any night.